All right, friends, we are officially live. I want to get this out immediately. I did not cause this show to start at 11:06. I'm not naming names, but I was here ready to go. It was still Lofty that caused the slight disruption, but Lofty is here in spirit. He's not physically here. He'll be back soon enough. So you know what we did? We brought in the big guns. Chris Spags, my man, here hanging out with me. I feel like we only do shows on the weekends, so now we got you on a Tuesday, ready to talk a little laid back. You asked me before show Goblins are involved. I really appreciate you hopping on and rolling with whatever this show is.
I'm excited to be here. Laffy is being the dad of the year again, having two children. What a hero. But all the parents out there know two. No, thank you. Stick with one. But very glad to be here with you, Ben, and glad to learn finally what is a goblin of the week, because I watched the show and I can't figure out what a goblin of the week is. And God damn it, I want to find out today.
Well, you're going to be not only finding out, you're going to be nominating your own goblins soon enough. But you guys know the drill. We're going to get into our plays. We're going to do the tiers, which I think is going to just be absolutely awesome. I always love doing that. We had a lot. We're going to talk about better. We're going to talk about our Cyber Monday deal. We've got a lot going on, but we're going to get into it. We've only got an hour here. I certainly want to know how your Thanksgiving was in life, but also, what did you think? You had those games. We had the Sunday games. Just general thoughts on what we saw the last week.
I think for me personally, I've been feeling like the takes I've been giving out, like I do my podcast Splash Player. I'm doing that Monday to Friday, doing it right after the show as well. If you want to come hang with me there, get the whoring out of the way right away. But I think it's also something where and I'm sure you feel this way too, Ben, where you put out a show and you're like, man, I got a lot of these takes right. And then you even build your lineups and you're like, man, I got parts of this right. And then it just doesn't come together in the way you want to see, where I played a ton of Michael Pittman this weekend with Michael Pittman, Mike Evans, and Jonathan Taylor in the same batch. And I just didn't land on the Josh Allen part of that, didn't land on the Kyron Williams, who just wasn't projected well enough with some of the sites out there that I used to roll into my projections. So it just felt like a week where I should have had bigger victories, and instead it ended with that dumpster fire last night where I could not have gotten enough lineups that were correct into that tournament. But also the game was just one of the worst games I think I've ever watched this year. And I've watched them all. I'll watch every Island game, but that one just depressed me for some reason.
It was terrible. I said to you, I watched a lot of college football. I watched a lot of college basketball. I'm all for bad sports, but there's an art form to it, and that was not it. Just disgusting. Going back to Thanksgiving, the Lions are going to continue to be a very controversial team, and we're certainly going to have a lot to say with them when we get to the tiers. But I didn't have a lot of other major takeaways. I thought that the Bills-Eagles game was fantastic, just a ridiculous game. On a personal level, the afternoon games exploding was extremely costly. We're not going to get into my pity story, but man, Kyron Williams, Pacheco, and Josh Allen and co. went nuclear. But other than that, I think everything was pretty standard. I didn't have those the favorites. Spags, I don't know if you looked at this. The favorites almost covered in basically every game. There was only a handful of underdogs that even kept it close. The Bears, the Giants, and the Packers were the only underdogs that even covered.
That's surprising. I mean, I guess it's not. It feels like the betting markets this year have been so heavily skewing towards the unders, so heavily skewing towards the teams that are just disappointing against the spread a lot. And I don't know. It's been a weird year for betting, and I'm sure you're more active in the NFL regular betting than I am. But I would say the one thing too that I do need to point out, the opposite of a goblin of the week, Christian Watson having a good game was really important to me. It was a moment I've been waiting for. I feel like his dad on social media defending him sometimes, but I think with Christian Watson, it's the one victory I would take from Thanksgiving, where didn't have the big wins in that one, had some good game theory going into it. But Christian Watson, I planted to flag for that one on a lot of content last week, and to see him finally come through, I feel like a proud papa who's lost a lot of money on his son and who's not going to help him advance in best ball.
Yeah, I was with you with Watson. I've been waiting. The first game was not the problem. It was the Seattle. Just DK Metcalf was a no-show, and it didn't need that. But yeah, well, Jordan Love. That's the last thing. We're gonna get into Goblin of the Week right now, but I do want to ask you: are you warming on Jordan Love? I'm not sure where you were to begin with, but he shows flashes at times.
I was really excited for Jordan Love coming into the year. I thought that with how bad Aaron Rodgers was last year, I know people don't want to hear that, but he was sub-league average QB in all the metrics I look at, in particular the EPA stuff that I think is very important to have as part of your process, breaking these players down. And I thought Jordan Love could come in based on what he showed last year, obviously limited sample size stuff, and be a world beater. And it looked like we had it in week one, and then he got worse. And then when he really bombed against the Broncos, I was like, it kind of seems over. But I watched the games. I'm not the biggest eye test guy, because I do think the data is the most important part. But watching Jordan Love, I was like, it seems like he's getting a little more comfortable in the pocket. Now he's a little bit less of a negative EPA player in the pocket. I know some of the YouTube channels out there, QB QB school. JT O'Sullivan does a good job of broken it down where like Jordan Love is actually sensing pressure now and getting the ball out and getting some snap to it. So I think he's live to like be a good player moving forward. But I think more importantly, like he's live to have some good games on the home stretch, which will hopefully keep Christian Watson moving.
Yeah, definitely. We're gonna need him to because he's got some weapons on the outside, and they're usually pretty cheap price points, and that obviously keeps them relevant. But all right, people want it. I know they do. It's time to get to the Goblin portion of the show. So I'm gonna give some brief parameters because you're a guest. It's really no parameters. It's just who, whether it's a game, a coach, a team, a moment left you saying just what we live in a society and this is not it. Like the Falcons are the leaders right now for all-time goblins because every week they do something nonsensical. For me, I'll get mine out of the way. I'm going to nominate the Panthers just as a whole. I don't understand what they're doing. I'm not a huge Frank Reich guy, but what did you exactly think was going to happen with that team, with Bryce Young? It's a complete rebuild. I feel like now it's like Candyland where you make progress and then you hit the thing and you go all the way back to the beginning. Why would you do that? It seems really, really short-sighted to fire him in the middle of the year and now you're back to square one. So I'm going to put the Panthers as a Goblin. Was there anything that stood out to you last week that left you saying Deontay Johnson style, like, what are we doing here?
I mean, Deontay Johnson, I think there's a case for some Goblin-esque activities for him with him not paying attention to the fumble, getting in locker room fights. But actually, I will say with the Steelers, and it's Pat Freiermuth for me, where just him coming out of nowhere for the outlier day. And I guess he'd be a good Goblin if you played him and you got that right. Under 3K salary on DraftKings, he goes off for over 20 PPR points. But it just felt like it came out of nowhere. And if I'm a new offensive coordinator coming in, and I do think that's one of the flaws that I think a lot of us as sort of touts or whatever, as content creators do, where it's like, if I were the coach, I'd do this. If I were the coach, I would be like, let's feed George Pickens. Let's feed this explosive athlete who just doesn't get enough targets, doesn't get the work. Deontay Johnson as well, another squeaky wheel guy who you could feed, who's been at least a good target earner, even if he hasn't been the most efficient. And instead they go out there and it's like, yeah, let's stick with this 50-50 Najee Harris, Jalen Warren split. And let's also really get Pat Freiermuth going, which to me, like the one thing that hurts me out of all the Steelers is just, I have Kenny Pickett, I have Pickens, I have enough Deontay Johnson, I have Jalen Warren out the wazoo. And then Pat Freiermuth is just going off in a way where it's like, I hate tight ends so much. I really feel like tight end should just be a flex position, and is how I really feel about that.
The thing that was also frustrating about Freiermuth was I saw, and I'm like, not that I discovered this, he's active in week 11 and he's 2,500. And it's like, this could be pretty interesting. Maybe I'll splash. He has one catch on one target for 7 yards. And it's like, okay, not something that's really viable. And then we see an 11 target game right after last week. And it's just, that's so frustrating. I do want to ask you though, because we just alluded, complimentary Goblin, Deontay Johnson, what exactly, I mean, you saw that play, like, should we be giving him a pass for that? Or is that just like, you can't be walking around out there?
Like, I don't know if you've ever played, like, you're not a big video game guy, right, Ben?
Not really.
So like there's been various video games throughout the years. Like there's one actually I sometimes play on the Oculus where it's like a VR football game. And then like there's also been like the Maddens and NFL 2Ks where like you're in that first player mode. It's pretty hard to see what you're doing if you're not familiar with how that goes. So like just being in the helmet, like the limited visibility of that, you're looking at different parts, you're not seeing everything around you. So I could get how Deontay Johnson wouldn't do that. But then when you pair that with the other stuff we know where he's getting in locker room fights with the defensive players or having to like hold them back and calm them down and recenter him, it's a bad combined look. But I do think that like you give him a little bit of grace because it's very possible he just didn't see it, but it also feels like he's just not motivated to do anything, which I get because Kenny Pickett's not even throwing him the ball now. And at least he's the one guy who was getting the ball. And now he's not getting it either.
Okay. Helmet. Yeah, I played Halo back in the day. That guy had a helmet. He didn't miss any fumbles. He was picking up stuff off the ground, but
that was in space though. It's clearly different.
Yeah, that is in space. That's true. He's on another planet. He's fighting aliens with little plasma grenades. Deontay Johnson, slightly different, no doubt about it. But let's get to it, Spags. This, to me, is my favorite part of the show. Then we're going to dive into the quarterbacks, running backs, and all that good stuff. But the NFL tiers. So again, there's probably going to be some stuff here where I'll have to explain because you're just like, what is this show? Because we got some weird categories on the board, and some of them do have rules. So we've got Super Bowl favorites, playoff teams, fringe playoff teams, maybe next year. Bizarro Freak Show, which is just the Saints. So you don't have to worry about that. The Chikings, which is a purgatory category. If you go in there, you can never leave. So we have to be very careful if we put someone in there because they can never leave. No bueno, fire them into the sun. And then the DeVito Goblin. So anyone that loses to the Giants, I have a feeling, obviously, the Patriots are going to be down in that category. But the floor is yours. I know you just kind of got to look at this. I mean, your first impressions, are there teams like the Lions? Do you think we bump them down, or they still feels like they're a playoff team, right?
Yeah, I think they're a playoff team. I think you're allowed to throw in the occasional bad game. I know our old pal Emax said this years ago to me. It always kind of stuck with me that, like, for an MLB pitcher, it's not about how good they are every single game. It's about how they handle the games where they don't have their stuff. And sometimes that's what kind of defines their season as well as defines them on a DFS slate. And I feel like for the Lions, I would feel that way for them as well, where I think they're a playoff team. I don't think they're a true contender. The Ravens, I might be inclined to take out of Super Bowl favorites. I know that they've been a very positive team in some advanced metrics. I just kind of feel like, that Chargers game was not the prettiest. The results were still fine, but I still feel like for them, I just haven't believed in the Ravens to the same extent. I feel like Lamar himself just doesn't really seem like he's had the ceiling we thought he'd have with Todd Monken. So I would bump him down personally, and I might be inclined to bump. Well, I guess the Dolphins, you can't make the case after what they did this past week. Like the Cowboys maybe should come up. I don't know. That's how I feel about it, at least with first glance of the tiers. And I also don't have great eyesight, so the categories are very difficult.
Well, it's all blurry. Yeah, you got to use the force. Yeah, I think the first two full categories, really those teams somewhat interchangeable. I don't think there's drastic decisions that have to be made. Even the Browns. I think they're still a potential playoff team. I know they've got some issues right now. They still have that defense. They need to step it up. They're teetering, but I'm okay there. The Bills, I still think are fringe. The Seahawks, the Rams, the Steelers, the Texans. How do you feel? You think the Texans still have life as a potential playoff team?
I'm not sure about what the latest odds are. I mean, I do think they have a pretty good matchup coming up this week as well. I feel like for the Texans, CJ Stroud could throw him in any game. Like there were a couple plays that got called back in that one that were absolutely insane, where we got out of the pocket, hit Tank Dell for a 50-yard bomb, and I believe I called back for illegal formation or holding on something like that. But Stroud every week impresses me. Like I think he can throw them into games. It's gonna be tough to make the playoffs. It feels to me like the Steelers, like I don't agree with this talent wise. I feel like the Steelers and Browns, you can make a case to swap, where Brown's going to maybe have to go with PJ Walker for a little bit. We'll see if DTR can get back out there after you left that last game early. The Steelers keep finding ways to win, and to a level that I find baffling. Like they're probably a team that gets wiped out in the wild card, but I think they're more likely to make the playoffs than the Browns, because Browns D can only carry him so far. And frankly, the D has given up enough production, and Myles Garrett misses any time. I feel like that wouldn't be a great thing.
I'm gonna agree with you. I say we do it. Jordan, let's swap the Steelers and the Browns. I think that the Steelers are just, at some point, it becomes more than, I don't want to say luck, but if you keep winning these ugly, close games, it becomes a trademark. They obviously have a way to do it. The Browns do have some questions. As we move to the bottom, I think the only teams that I'd really like to discuss, the Packers maybe going up to maybe next year. I don't know if they're fully in no bueno at this point. And the Panthers, they might have to be fired into the sun with what they're putting out on the field right now. Those are the only two, but if there's anything else that you see, feel free.
I feel like the Bengals just should be on a lower tier inherently with what we're going to get the rest of the year. There's gigantic dog coming up on Monday Night Football, almost a 9-point dog. And Jake Browning, I think, is clearly not going to be any sort of answer, let alone anything approximating Joe Burrow. So I would bump them down. Colts feisty, but I don't think they need to move. Really nothing else jumps out that much, man. I just feel like the Bengals being above anything, they can't even tank properly now, I don't think. And that's going to be pretty tough for them, because this season is the ultimate bust season. The Bills are in a bust season. The Bengals are in a bust season times 10.
A lot of requests. Chad, I hear you. We're going to have to fire the Panthers into the sun. Just people are very upset. Put them into the solar system. I don't like space.
But is it going to get worse for the Panthers, though? I mean, I know it's a really low implied total this week. It's 15.8, I think. which is not very good. But like with how that offense is run, and granted, I was never the biggest believer in Bryce Young. I know it's easy to say that now, but like I loved AR. Stroud, I also loved a lot more than Young. I just didn't think Young was more than a system QB, and it's a bad system. That said, like at least there's an opportunity to bring somebody else in. I don't know that a special teams coordinator taking over as head coach is like the way you change that, but at least there's like hope, I guess, that it could be a fresh slate. And people are talking about, the bounce back game after a fired coach. We've seen it with Antonio Pierce. I think it's possible that's the case because, frankly, to me, like, no pun intended, but Frank Reich last year, I think, lost his fastball. And then this year we saw it where it's just like the solution should never be, let's give Adam Thielen 15 targets a game. Like, and that's what his solution was.
Nope. I think we're in pretty good shape. The final thing, we have to move the Patriots into the DeVito category because he Shang Tsung them, and now he has another soul. He has taken Washington's soul and he has taken the Patriots' soul. So Tommy DeVito is just he's that guy right now.
Is he not bad? Like, are we officially going to say like he's not awful?
I think he's standard bad, and I mean that as a compliment.
Okay. I thought he was like Nathan Peterman bad at first, but he was like so bad in the numbers that it was almost due for positive regression because you just can't be that bad and stay, a QB. But I think he's better than Peterman. Like, I mean, if you were to really say, like, put your life on the line, would you pick Zach Wilson in a game or DeVito? I think that's closer than it probably should be.
That's what I mean. Like, I think he was potentially historically bad, and he's not. He's just bad. He's in a lot of guys that are not the best. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like, but maybe he'll start to climb the ranks. We're gonna find out, and let's get to quarterbacks. Let's see if maybe we're gonna go to some egregious quarterbacks here. So we get into it. Obviously, we've got 10 games. There are some big names not here on buys and whatnot, but you still have Jalen Hurts. You've got Stroud. You've got Herbert. Tua, Kyle. I mean, there's so many guys up top. We're going to give our top three at each position. Looking at the top, I think Tua's in the best matchup. I think that's pretty clear. Do you agree with that? And are you looking to pay 8 for him or 8 for someone else?
Yeah, it's tough to pay that 8, but we did just see 8, win the tournaments with Josh Allen. It really does feel like a spot, though, with what we know of the Commanders, where, again, they've led to ceiling games for Tommy DeVito. They've led to ceiling games for all these guys. Obviously, Dak didn't have – well, I guess Dak had a pretty good game. It just wasn't the pass catchers kind of, concealing that together, but merging that together to make it for a meaningful day for them. I think Tua in the spot, though, like, to me, it should be a plus 30 implied total for them. So I would say it's probably Tua for me, but that price tag is really tough, especially given that Tua doesn't run. And it kind of feels to me like the Mahomes price tag last week, where can you really justify an AK salary for a guy who doesn't run? Yes, but if you're like going QB plus 3 stacks, I think is the way you do that. So I would say it's Tua, but like that price point is really tough.
Yeah, it's tricky because he's not going to give you much of anything outside. It's a blessing and a curse. You're going to stack him up, but he's not going to give you 4 extra points just for doing whatever. And I never used to think this about like Justin Herbert. He's got 120 rushing yards in 2 games. He's been more than happy to pull it down. He gets New England. We'll have to check weather and whatnot, but I do think you can go him. I want to ask you, though, before we move down, about Jalen Hurts specifically. He's unbelievable. He's at home, but he's got the Niners defense. Is that a price tag you're willing to pay against a defense of that caliber?
It's tough because I do think the Niners have definitely looked resurgent since their bye. And analytically, they've still been a pretty good defense. I think just the results weren't there during that stretch where they lost all the games in a row. But it's tough. Like, I think this implied total, I haven't checked the alternate markets yet. And that tends to be one thing where if you see the alternate totals being kind of hedges against the main market line, you could say maybe this game will be an outlier effort. And that's been something I've been tracking pretty aggressively over the last, I guess, year and change. And I think for this game, like if I see alternate totals that are 49, 50, like I'd have a little more faith. But it feels like with these defenses, like it should be a game where you're trading drives. Maybe it does get there at the end, kind of like the Bills-Eagles game did this past weekend. But I don't know that I have the faith that this is like a back and forth shootout. And to pay, 8,200, I might be more inclined to go to Purdy on the other side because the Eagles defense, we know a few more flaws, I think. And it's tough to pay for Hurts, but I probably would pay for 2 over him if I had to choose.
Okay, yeah. So for me, just to kind of start my top end quarterback, I am going to pay for Tua. If I have to pay up, I just think the matchup is too good to pass up. You've got a double-digit Dolphins favorite. Yes, they're on the road, but it's almost a 50-point total. It's Tua. They've got every weapon imaginable. That's who I would pay up for as my top QB.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Hurts a great player. I think this year maybe coming down a little bit to earth, but still for the most part, getting the results you want to get as a potential winning team. Like obviously they've only lost one game, so hard to ignore that. But I think relative to matchup, like I think this is the game where Tua can put up 40 just through passing touchdown because he's not going to run for it. Whereas for Hurts, it's like if he's going to get a good game, it's going to be gritting out like 30, I think. And it's just different situations.
In that mid-range, you already mentioned Purdy as a potential play. We've got guys like Goff. He's not in his home stadium, but it's still in a dome. You've got Sam Howell, you've got Stafford, you've got Russell Wilson. So a lot of mid-range plays that we could go to. I'm gonna make a case, and I don't feel comfortable doing it, but Sam Howell throws the ball 45 times a game, every game, and he's gonna be trailing. He's on the other side of the Tua game. Could you envision a way to maybe go to him and take a piece of Miami as the run back and stack up Washington? Or I know you mentioned Purdy already. Is Purdy where you gravitate in the 6K range?
No, I'm with you on Howell. I think actually Howell's part of what makes the Tua play more interesting to me because Tua, obviously, if he has somebody competing on the other side, throwing for some touchdowns, keeping that game close, we're going to see more Tua in that game and maybe less just running back play. But I think even if you do see Howell go off, like you could also see the running backs for Miami as a way to get, obviously we'll see what the ownership's going to be, but a way to get more unique perhaps. I would hope that Achane gets back in. We'll see though what the workload is coming off the knee injury and at a $6,900 price tag. It's not the best price tag to be paying for Achane. But I would say there's a world where you could build a Washington stack and then you have the one bring back, maybe two from Miami, pass catcher and a running back. So I like Howell as a concept. I think Purdy, I'm a little more comfortable paying 6,100 for Purdy than 6,200 for Howell, but Howell's just going to have to score points. And I think that's something that is going to come with some risk, but it could also come with a 4-touchdown game or something like that.
I do think that's kind of where I'm looking to choose in the mid-range. I do want to ask you, though, if I can, about Stafford. Arizona, please stop. But he torched them. Kyron Williams was, eased back in with 200 yards and a couple touchdowns, no problem. Just ridiculous. He's got every weapon. The problem I've had with Stafford, and I'm sure I'm not alone, how are you going to figure out who to stack him with? Higbee scoring touchdowns. Nakua is out there. Kupp is in and out of the lineup. He's banged up. And then Kyron. Does that make Stafford not playable? Or do you say, I'll roll the dice and I will get to some potential Ram stacks?
I just don't want to go against the Cleveland defense, even though they are sort of leveling out a little bit. We're still talking about, and this is not including this past week's numbers because I haven't updated my data. I do that on Wednesdays, but 63% completion rate on throws of under 20 air yards, 21% completion rate on throws of more than 20 air yards. So like they've been shutting down everything. They also shut down the run, a negative 0.16 EPA on run plays as well. If you get in the red zone, you could score in Cleveland, but I just don't know the Rams have enough to get into the red zone. So I kind of think this is a fall down spot for Kyron Williams after the big game this past week, but also with Stafford, it's like he's another guy that doesn't run. So you need that entire stack to get there. And I just don't see ceiling outcomes for like Kupp and Puka or Kupp and Higbee or whatever, whatever mix of that you want to do. And I really think there's a Kyron trap week this week coming where I think people will chase that. And I just don't think it's a spot against the Browns.
Are you looking, every week there are a couple of, low end options, maybe not the best real life quarterbacks, but if you say I want the Tyreek one-offs, I want to pay up at running back, I need a cheap stack. And Minshew has been that at times. I guess Ritter at times. Your boy Kenny Pickett is 5,100 against Arizona. Is that a spot? I mean, are you looking to punt at quarterback? And if you do, is there a guy that stands out down there?
So I think for me, a lot, the Sims will tell a lot of the picture for me later in the week,
Absolutely.
But I do think Kenny Pickett jumps out. Like the matchup against Arizona is just so good on the year. 0.07 EPA per drop back allowed, 0.08 EPA per pass. I'm on deep throws as well. They're getting up a 59% completion rate and a 1.2 EPA. So like they're getting strafed everywhere, where if we are going to see Kenny Pickett actually extend downfield and be a new QB and frankly, QB closer to what he was in college, I'm sure Ben can attest, where he was at Pitt, he actually threw deep balls and, looked pretty good doing it. Obviously that's college, weaker competition and all that. But I think Pickett's kind of interesting. And I would say too, Gardner Minshew kind of didn't get there for me this week against Tampa Bay. I felt like that was a matchup where it could have ran a little better for him in terms of the passing touchdowns. We know Taylor takes enough equity away, but against Tennessee, who does have the shutdown run defense, is a pure pass funnel. I think Tennessee is a pretty good matchup as well. 76% completion rate on throws of less than 20 air yards. Like Minshew can rack up, 10 targets to Pittman, 15 targets to Pittman, maybe 10 targets to Josh Downs, and he could really chunk play away this one against Tennessee. So I think to me, it'd be like Minshew and Pickett are the two that stand out just because the matchups are going against are pristine for any QB.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Minshew, I was with you. I didn't really even have a ton, but I watched that game because I had some Baker stacks, and I actually thought that Minshew kind of got a raw deal in some regards. Now he did score on the ground, but he could have had a much bigger game there with a couple different plays. So, all right, just to recap it, I think we both have Tua at the top.
Yep.
If you had a mid-range quarterback, Purdy, Howell. For me, it's Howell.
Yeah, I agree. It's Howell. It's Howell by a little bit, but Purdy is still a play that I think you get some of.
And then for me, and look at the synergy, by the way, chat. We did not preemptively talk about this. I have Kenny Pickett as my punt. I just think that he has got so many weapons, and maybe it is my buy. You know, you mentioned I watch a lot of college football. I've seen Kenny Pickett look like a real quarterback and do it at times, and it hasn't been lately. But I still believe he kind of has that if we get the right game script and the right conditions against Arizona. This would be a spot for him to really maybe get some volume and efficiency combined.
And it's a high implied total by Pittsburgh standards. Like being over 22 is a lot for them, given what they've played on the year. And Arizona is just a really good matchup. I try not to chase shootout games just because the defense is weak, because that's something, last night I think you would have chased Josh Dobbs in a spot against Chicago's pass defense, and obviously the total was the more correct part of that. But for this one, you're seeing a higher total than usual, a little bit lower on the Arizona side. But I think you could see, Steelers put up 28 points here, and maybe 2 of them are Pickett touchdowns, and that would be his first multi-touchdown game ever, I think.
In the history of his life. So yeah, Kenny Pickett put it on the board, I think, for both of us as the pay down option. We did have one question before we moved to running backs about Russell Wilson. He had 11 carries in that game. He was very keen to pull it down and run. I do think his price point makes him very playable against Houston, good conditions. I'd love to see the passing volume, consistently creep into the 30s. Some of it is that they're winning now, and maybe it won't be so easy in Houston. I don't have a strong take. I think he's more than playable. Do you have a strong take on Russ Wilson?
I don't want to say I've enjoyed watching him. I've watched a lot of him because I'm always targeting Denver because Denver's defense. I know people in the chat have pushed back on this in the past, including on Sunday we were doing the first look show. They're like, Denver's defense is good. And once again, Denver gets positive results against Cleveland, but also gives Dorian Thompson-Robinson the best drive he's had in his young career, where he was like just strafing them with passes. And I think it was after halftime before he got hurt. So I think Denver is still a soft defense, and by attacking him with an aggressive, high pass rate over expectation team like Houston, I think you can get there. So I think if that's the case, if Houston is getting success, like Russ kind of gets there a little bit more. But he's been feisty. It's just like the plays that he's throwing. I mean, 6.1 intended air yards per attempt. Like he is a mobile Drew Brees right now, but a little bit less accuracy, a little bit less command of the offense, but definitely can get the chunk plays through the ground. I get liking Russ. I personally would rather just have Russ shares and best ball and just let those do what they do. Because playing Russ right now is just, I don't know what the upside really is for the stack with him, even though he's running a little bit more.
Yeah, I think he might actually factor maybe more into a cash conversation. I think he's got a pretty good floor. I'm just not sure tournament winning upside is really what I'm tapping into there. But again, we will see what the Sims do. We'll see what the tools do. We're going to move the running back in 1 second. I do want to mention, though, again, we got a lot of stuff going on, and there's a lot of opportunities to take these takes and apply them and make some money. And Better, if you haven't heard of it, it's just another place to do just that. If you haven't been over there, first of all, they sponsor this show, so they got to be good people. Second, they're looking to double your deposit, that up to that 500. So you're going to get some extra money just by signing up over there and playing. And then what is it? Of course, we need to kind of know what we're doing. And it's one of these sites, a lot of them have popped up, where you're taking fantasy and you're kind of putting that spin in the pick'em contest, and you're gauging over and unders. You're gauging some of these things. And you have those opportunities to really craft different types of cards with different levels of risk. If you go up to 8 picks, you can get 100 extra entry. That's kind of that large field tournaments that we're all used to. If you go a little more conservative, obviously the payout's not going to be as high. Chance of success is much higher. They have a bunch of sports over there. They're obviously growing. I've seen a lot about this in social media streets, people having some success. You see Josh is giving it a thumbs up. If he's giving it a thumbs up, it's got to be.
He loves the Paul brothers so much. He supports every endeavor they do. He's got cases full of prime behind him. He loves it.
He's, the guy's, he's everywhere. So if he's giving it a thumbs up again, you do have to be 21 plus, but go check out that app again. Click the link in the description and at least read about it, see what they're about. If you say, you know what, this could be a spot to build the bankroll, maybe I put some money in there. You get that match, and now you're off to the races. So shout out to Better for sponsoring this show. We got to find some running backs, though, because we've got McCaffrey. We've got Eckler. We've got Kamara, Mostert. You mentioned maybe we go Miami ground game. When you look at the top of the board, Is this where you're thinking of paying up, saving? How do you break down your first impressions at running back?
I mean, my first impression is really like play the Miami running backs. I
Yeah.
just it's the matchup is too good. I think the opportunity to get ahead is too good. Obviously we do have the question marks with Achan potentially coming back in. I think he'll play in this game, but we'll see what the practice reports come out throughout the course of the week. But if you don't have him, you have Mostert. If you have Jeff Wilson there, who did play pretty well from a showdown perspective on Friday, but not enough for a main slate lineup to really want to get to him. So there's some questions for sure, but I do think that there's going to be opportunity to get 2 rushing touchdown game, maybe a 3 rushing touchdown game here. So I would say attacking Miami's running backs is the first thought for me. Besides that, I do think McCaffrey, I like, you can always get with McCaffrey. I think it depends where the chalk goes this week. But McCaffrey in a slate where you do have chalk going towards the 5K running backs always appeals to me, especially in kind of a high leverage game where they're not going to be going to Eli Mitchell in this one. They're going to probably want to score a lot of points and do the best they can to keep that competitive. So I think those are probably the main takes I have, but are there any that jump out to you, I guess?
So listen, I'm not going to push back on Miami. If Mostert's good to go, whoever's good to go back there, fantastic, fantastic spot. I'm going to roll it. I like to change it up once in a while on the show and give at least someone who I don't think he'll be extremely popular. I think that Kamara quietly is putting it together. I know it's a frustrating team because you've got Taysom Hill, you've got Carr at times really making it difficult. I want to see what's going on, but it looks early impressions. Shaheed might be hurt for real, and he could miss some time. Olave was banged up there. We'll see. I think there are paths where Alvin Kamara could be extremely busy against Detroit's defense. And I'm talking like he's got his 15 carries and then you give him 6 to 10 targets. That's the type of volume I want for Kamara because we know if he can get those targets, his floor immediately gets to where we need it to be and his ceiling becomes playable. So he's 8,200. I think he's probably a little overpriced. If the Sims like him and he's not popular, I think Kamara is a really interesting tournament play this week.
I think I would need to see Olave stay in concussion protocol for me
Yeah.
to feel a little more comfortable with that, just because, again, we have seen so many guys take touches away from Kamara. And at a certain point, I hope Kendre Miller gets back in the mix, though. We'll see. It feels like he's had a cursed year injury-wise, and he's not the guy that's going to take meaningful touches away from Kamara. But if he is active, like he takes a few away. But I get it with Kamara. Like he was a guy that really graded out well for me early in the year because he was getting such a preponderance of targets per game. And it's still technically about 8 targets per game. So I guess like that pass game work is there. But it does feel like whenever you are playing Kamara, it's like, oh, there goes that Taysom Hill touchdown. Oh, Derek Carr is running for one. Oh, like this guy. It's just that's how it goes, I think, if you're on the side of Kamara. So I get it. I just don't think I want to pay 8,200 for him personally.
Yeah. I'm hoping that everybody thinks that because I think it's a pretty logical stance to take. And if Kamara is, very low owned, I think I can roll the dice and maybe get over without allocating because Mostert is going to be popular if he plays, and he should be. You mentioned Kyron is right there. I think I agree with you. Maybe a short against Cleveland's defense. Let's work to the mid range though. Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, Bijan. Obviously, Bijan worked out, and then what happens? Kyron just outscores him by 20 points in the late slate, and I still don't get that pivot right. You got Gibbs. Talk to me here. Anything stand out? Most guys, I would say, are a pretty tough matchup for the most part.
Yeah, I was looking through and kind of scrolling through the matchups here and seeing if anything jumped out, but I agree, Gibbs and Montgomery against tough New Orleans defense, definitely not standing out too meaningfully. New Orleans D does defend running back targets pretty well as well, so I don't expect this to be a Gibbs outlier day in that respect either. Washington, I prefer the Miami side of the equation. I just don't think that Washington's going to have a ton of work. But I guess that is one way to theoretically get leverage on the Miami running backs is if one team's running backs don't hit, the other team's running backs have a higher shot at hitting. So I could see that. Pittsburgh, I actually think is kind of interesting here. We did see Jaylen Warren get a few more targets. It was a pure 50-50 share. So I do think it's a dice roll. Interesting that Warren is higher priced this week because he became very sneaky chalk last week. People were really chasing that big game. And I would say that both Warren and Najee are in play just because Arizona is so bad. And if the Pickett stuff that Ben and I hypothesized about isn't correct when we talked about QBs, running backs are probably getting there because they're going to somebody's going to score against Arizona. Arizona's just not good. And I do think that Warren and Harris, if Pickett fails or even if Pickett succeeds, probably are guys that get there or one of them gets there.
I never want to play the if game, but I do think that Jaylen Warren is a fumble away from seeding serious work. He fumbled last week and Najee did play well. I don't think you really worry about that because if he's rolling, and that's what you need. And if he's playing bad, you're probably in trouble. So I'm completely fine with that. Rachaad White, chat mentioned, I get it against the Panthers. He's at home. This guy, I talk about wrong. I thought that Sean Tucker was going to slowly take over that backfield. I don't even know if he's on the team anymore. And if he is, he's watching Rachaad White just run the ball all day long. 6,300, I think, is a fair price. And I think that's definitely a playable target in the mid range.
Yeah, Rachaad White is one I think that is worth a little more attention just because of the matchup. Carolina with a low implied total. Rachaad White gets good work in the pass game as well as obviously a good run matchup, though. For whatever reason, Carolina does defend running back targets pretty well. Negative 0.4 EPA is about the best mark in the league for defending running back targets. So maybe a little bit less efficacy for Rachaad White there. The Sean Tucker thing real fast. I've hated Sean Tucker since I first looked at his data in January. And then like you watch his highlights too, and it's him. Oh, he broke a 50-yard run versus Mercer. Like here are his highlights. So
Mercer's very scrappy on that D line. That's right.
But it's just funny. Like that's the thing that I picked up from this year. Like of really, this was my first year going in and like really digging on the numbers and then watching some tape of the rookies and trying to figure out who was who. And I think I got a lot of takes right. Like got the rookie tight end stuff right. Got AR right for our 4-week window. Got Stroud right. Tucker, though, was one where I was like, he got so much volume and he has some track skills and whatever. And I was a little worried about it, but man, he's got nothing. He's got absolutely nothing.
Not good. Can I ask you, because I'm just burying myself here for no reason. Maybe it's just TCU because Dotson's not going to the Hall of Fame. Jalen Reagor confirmed not a Hall of Famer just yet. Quentin Johnson, I, like a lot of people, have been waiting, and we've seen it. I don't need to dive into those plays. Are you shocked by this? Is that what you expected, or is it somewhere in between?
He is one of my highest exposed best ball guys, so I was in the bag for him. I thought the avoided tackle rate stuff is really interesting to me because I kind of felt like, oh, here's a thing that they could use here. They need yak guys on the Chargers, and I thought he would get the opportunity to kind of succeed or fail. And it feels like based on Sunday night, whereas routes were the lowest they've been in about, I think a month, definitely probably the lowest they've been since Palmer went out at the very least. And it's just like it's not there for him right now, and it feels like they're losing faith in him a little bit. I still think he's not like a bust. I think he's kind of gotten unlucky. That pass he had where to the game before last where he could have won the game and it went through his hands. Like at least he got open enough to make that play. And I think that's what I'm still seeing in him is like he's getting separation. He's able to do some stuff. And we know if he gets the ball in his hands, he's going to make guys miss. So I think there are positive things here, but like I would play him again next year. But I think for this year, he might be close to dust unless like Keenan Allen goes out.
Very dusty. Yeah. Unfortunate. That's one I was really surprised, and we'll see. Let's recap it. So for running backs, for me, just to rattle off my what are little tiers here, we've got Kamara at the top. I'm going to go Bijan in the middle. I still think that if he's going to get 20 total touches, the Jets are just breaking down. Boyle is not a serious quarterback. I just have nothing, even though I respect that defense. I'll go Robinson. I'm going to throw Javonte Williams as my pay down. I just think that another way to get exposure to Denver, he's got healthy workload. And then the last thing I want to say before I pass it to you, if Jonathan Taylor, I know there are reports that he hurt his thumb and he could be actually hurt, that will change everything. And of course, I think Zach Moss would be a prevalent discussion point for all of us on Sunday.
Yeah, Zach Moss, definitely an interesting play who did get a lot of work down the stretch of that game. And I guess it makes more sense if Taylor was hurt, but it did seem like Moss had lost the role to Taylor, but then he was in on a lot of high leverage situations as well as third and longs. So yeah, I could see Moss being the chocolate that breaks it up. In terms of the tiers, I guess, or price tiers rather, I would say McCaffrey is probably my pay up guy. A little bit cheaper than that. I think the Miami running backs would be the ones that I'm the most interested in. Mostert and Achane, assuming Achane is going to be in. Middle tier for me would be the Steelers running backs. I think are kind of interesting, and White as well. I think White's a good play, but I think he'll be really well projected and be pretty close to chalky. That would be my guess. And then I think that's it. Like pay down guys, like real pay down guys. Antonio Gibson, vaguely interesting for the game script where he could catch a few passes, and he definitely got that pass game role back from Brian Robinson. But I don't know that Gibson excites me. Like Moss would be exciting, even though it would be a tough matchup against Tennessee with what they do run funnel wise. But Gibson, I think, does stand out relative to that price tier.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of go through those, of course, McCaffrey, you can't push back on that ever. Just always playable. Steelers running backs. It is a roulette wheel. I think it's very difficult to know, but I think there's paths for both of them to get there. Certainly not playing them together on a main slate is too much opportunity cost, but either one I think makes sense. And then Gibson, I don't know about you, on Thanksgiving, he was a piece for me that I actually thought could have been a key to the slate. And I know for a lot of reasons that game got out of control, but I thought that him working back, I know Robinson was catching like 80 yarders, but that's not a real thing. Gibson could maybe be a pay down option for Washington in maybe the best game of the week. I I think we're good. Yeah, keep an eye on Zach Moss. I really hope that that's not a situation. He's killed me a lot this year
Well, also just the
already.
chalk running back against Tennessee. Like I'll never forget the Jamal Williams earlier in the year was like,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Sims when the Sims were brand new. And I was like,
Brand
I
new.
love you, Sims. And holy shit, did he bury me?
Not great. I remember that week quite vividly. All right, let's get to wide receivers. We're also going to talk about, by the way, with all these backs, I'm our Cyber Monday. It's Tuesday, but Cyber Monday apparently continues. I don't know what goes on anymore. Tell you about that in a little bit. Lineup generator for less than $5. But I want to talk about wide receiver. I mean, it honestly starts. I want to ask you this almost as a one-off. Are you okay? You're going to try to make room for a $9,600 Tyreek.
Yeah, I was just looking at that price point. It's
That
getting
is
pretty
crazy.
tough. He also could go for 250 yards in this game, and it wouldn't shock me. So I think you have to play some. If the field's not going to be there for the ownership, I think this is absolutely a potential ceiling spot. You run the risk if Washington doesn't keep up. You see the running backs do stuff. Certainly possible that other guys can get open here. There's no spot where Washington's defense is good. So they can go to Waddle outside a little bit more. They can get some running back targets going. There's a lot of things they could do here that make it not an outlier game for Tyreek Hill, but he's just so involved. I mean, for a wide receiver, he's getting a touch 25% of the time that he's out there getting a snap. That's a pretty high target rate, touch rate for a guy who is just, a wide receiver. And I think for Tyreek Hill, he's been great with it. And I just don't think the Commanders can do anything to stop him. So I'll pay that price tag, but God, that is a steep price tag.
It really is. But the good thing about Tyreek, I don't think price is that big of a he could be 12,000 and he's still he can get to any price point because of the way he plays. Obviously, the downside is bad, but if he busts at 9.6 or he busted at 10.8 you're in big trouble no matter what. Now, do you think that opens up leverage for Keenan Allen, for AJ Brown, who was quiet for a change in the last game, for St. Brown, for Kupp? It's going to be hard to double up in those type of nosebleed price range. Is it Tyreek and then a big gap, or are you still looking to get to some of these guys?
Keenan Allen at 9K, they really priced up all these guys, huh? Is pretty tough as well. We know the ceiling is there for Keenan Allen. But again, you're paying a really pricey stack. If you were to go Herbert and Keenan Allen, that's 17K. And I think at that point, you might as well go for the 17.8 with Tua and Tyreek. So I think that's tough, but Allen isn't a good matchup. We saw again, Tommy DeVito do some things against this New England defense. I think absolutely Herbert can do the same things, if not better. It might be a bold take to say he might be slightly better than Tommy DeVito. AJ Brown, tough matchup for him. And it does feel like with losing Dallas Goedert, they have relied on Devontae Smith a little bit more and have treated him more like the 1B again to the 1A, as opposed to just a flat number 1, number 2 thing as it's been to start the year with AJ Brown. So I'm a little bit less inclined for AJ Brown, but I think it's certainly an okay play. In a competitive spot too, I feel like a Monra a little bit cheaper, kind of interesting. But I think Tyreek is a tier above all these guys. I think Allen's in a good spot. I think a Monra's in a good spot. But Tyreek, I think could go for 40, and it feels like that's in almost not a median outcome, but the 60th percentile, 70th percentile outcome.
I hear you. I'm not messing around. I'm going to try to get him and make room. In the sevens, there's still big time player. Mike Evans had a very, very nice game. It was close to being mega destruction. He had 6 for 70 and 2, which is going to get it done, but it wasn't, game over. Tank Dell, I've never seen a guy start at 3K and end the year at 10K, but he's on path because he goes up $500 every week. No signs of stopping. You've got Smith, you've got Ayuk. You mentioned earlier in the show, and I don't even think you were exaggerating, 10 to 15 targets is in the range of outcomes for Michael Pittman this week. 7,100. He's the guy I've gravitated towards. Who are you looking at in not that top tier, but maybe that next 7K range?
Yeah, I would say Pittman's the one that jumps out to me. I just think it's a really good spot against Tennessee, competitive game. I could see Pittman really racking up a lot of targets here. I think 100 yards is definitely in the equation for him. The 2 touchdown stuff is tough for Pittman because we do see running back touches go the other way. Minshew can run one in. There's enough ways to score. The tight ends randomly get touchdowns. Enough ways to score that don't go through Pittman that could be a little bit of a concern. Tank, though, I'm with you on that. Tank and Nico Collins both. I think this stack is pricey, but it's a pricey pivot, I think, to Miami, where you have Tank at 7,400, Nico at 66, Stroud at 81. But it's going against Denver, and I just don't think Denver's good. I think Denver's gotten very lucky at home, and I think that this is a matchup where Houston could put up a lot of points and do it really efficiently. So Tank, and I agree, like Tank should be probably an 8K, 9K guy. And by the end of the year, and he, like, eye test wise, he looks like Tyreek. He looks like the closest thing to Tyreek that's not Tyreek.
He really is incredible. I don't really understand what's going on, but man, it's wild out there. So I get it. I know we're working down and there's still plenty of guys. I do want to just ask you though, what do you think about New Orleans specifically? I know we have to play the what if game, but like, is this a situation if the whatever cards fall where they may, where like A.T. Perry is going to be playable all the way at the bottom? We saw, I turned on the TV and Lynn Bowden, who was a quarterback at times at Kentucky, is just catching or attempting to catch balls. He had 2 carries in that game. Is that a spot you're looking at as we work for the pay down? Or are you just saying, I'll wait and see. We'll see what the Sims get, and nothing stands out right now?
I would imagine if you get Shaheed out, that alone's probably going to make Perry come up. If you get Shaheed and Olave out, I think Perry becomes a pretty good play at 3,300. Like,
Yeah,
he's been pretty good. He graded out pretty well. He was a Wake Forest guy, right? If I remember
he
correctly.
was.
So yeah,
Yep.
like, played pretty well there. The numbers so far have been very good in the pros. Obviously, only getting 1.3 intended targets per game, but still pretty good air yard share. Avoids tackles a little bit. 0.67 EPA per target, which is going to come down. You can't stay that high, but at least it's a sign that he's been able to do something. And he, frankly, had a pretty impressive jump ball catch when Jameis was at QB for that brief stint as well. So I like A.T. Perry if we get these guys out, but if it's like Olave in and Shaheed out, I think that Perry is probably a little bit less appealing, because I just assume that Olave will concentrate some more targets for himself.
Working up just a little bit again. I know we're bouncing around, but I do think it's important to kind of almost think of the quarterbacks and then go to this. Like, if we both say that Kenny Pickett is playable, what does that really mean? Is that a Deontay Johnson? Is it your boy Pickens? Are you looking to those guys? Is it somebody else? Sutton is in that mid range. McLaurin never gets there, but I probably will try for the 15th consecutive week. He had 11 targets. What are we doing on Thanksgiving? Man, I love that. But, I think Washington has Curtis Samuel as well. What are you seeing in that kind of, 4 to 5K range?
I like McLaurin because I think people are getting a little cozy with Curtis Samuel having these outlier days. And I agree, like, McLaurin should be a guy. Like, to start the year, I really thought he'd be the one that benefits from Howell being kind of a relentless gunslinger guy who does force the ball downfield, and just hasn't been the case, even though Howell has forced the ball downfield and dropped back a ton. For Pittsburgh, it is really tough to trust these guys, but I do think Pickens under 5K kind of feels a little Christian Watson-y to me, where the usage is still there. The routes are still there. He's running 56 snaps per game, 32 routes. If we do just see him getting finally have an outlier day in terms of target share, like he was getting when Deontay Johnson was out, I think he can get there. But Johnson is at the same price point. That stack honestly does look kind of nice. Like with Pickett, 5,100. God, the Sims are going to put us on a lot of Pickett, aren't they? I feel like with this
Really
price and the point total, everybody's under 5,500. It is Pittsburgh stacks, I think, are kind of interesting.
Oh boy, here we go. I hear you. I do. And I'm a little scared. But all right, to sum it up for me, my tiers, my whatever we want to call them, Tyreek Hill, number 1. Just what does it say? Michael Pittman, number 2 at 7.1. I'm not even going to say this guy's my favorite guy. I just wanted to give someone in the lower range. I know you mentioned him and he is running really hot. Curtis Samuel continues to just get some work. He's 4,100. If we don't get that like A.T. Perry value, if you don't want to go to like Dortch or Woods, I think that you can look to Samuel. I do prefer McLaurin, but it's a different price point. Just wanted to give him a shout out before we move on. Any thoughts on your receivers, kind of your priorities?
No, I think it's Tyreek and Keenan Allen to a lesser extent, but I think Tyreek, to me, like I can pay that price point. I know what I'm getting for Keenan Allen. I worry you get the 18-point day, and if that's the case, you're probably pretty close to dead. Middle tier, I agree. Like Pittman, I think is a guy I've been in the bag for, and I'm impressed to see how well he's adapted to Gardner Minshew, as well as having some good games when the AR was in there too. But really nice matchup for him on paper. We'll see if the ceiling can get there because of the lack of touchdowns, but I think I'm willing to find out. And then for the cheapish guys, I do think Pittsburgh, like just Deontay Johnson or Pickens, I think are both going to look pretty good. Both of them together would make a little more sense if you are going to play Pickett as the QB, but it's just too cheap of a price tag going against Arizona and Pittsburgh. I think like if you know the matchup, like this is where you should feed these guys and try to get them to a happier place. And I would do that if I were the offensive coordinator, but I'm not. So we'll find out.
Yeah, well, you're probably closer than you were just a couple of weeks ago.
Just knock them off one by one.
One by one, baby. You'll be right at there. You're in the area. Why not? Hollywood will smash eventually. I get that. If you want to stick with him, I think it's been a frustrating with McBride and Rondale and Dortch. And they've been a mess, but I get it with Hollywood. He seems all right. He's playing through that injury and whatnot. All right, we're going to go to tight ends, and we're going to do one defense on the way out. I do want to mention, though, we've talked about the Sims a lot, and Spags, I know you use them and like them, and I've been using them, and it's great. And I think it's a really cool way to build, and certainly I advise people to check them out. But if you're just getting into DFS, or you say, you know what, I'm looking for something a little quicker, I want to just kind of make some lineups, use your tools, but I'm not going all the way to the Sims just yet. We've got something for you. It's our lineup generator. It is awesome. First of all, it's incredibly fun just to play around with. It's also very, very, very key to your process. And with Cyber Monday, you can come on in and get the lineup generator package for less than $5. We're talking about $4.95 for the week. The promo code is CYBER, which if you don't know how to spell that, these tools are probably not for you, but it's right on the screen just in case you need some help. $4.95. Again, you try it out. These tools can make the difference. Super simple. And maybe you win some money and say, I want to see more. I want to try out the Sims and things like that. We have a ton of people that do that. We also have a ton of people that say, you know what, this is perfect for what I do. And I don't mind having, if you play any volume, an extra $4.95 to make your lineups just a little better, I think is really worth it. Come see for yourself, see what it's all about. We really believe in these tools here at Stochastic, and I hope you guys will see it for yourself. But we do have to find, you mentioned tight end, you're for just erasing the position. We are going to have to find some. It's pretty thin. It's not as deep. Taysom Hill is up there. Kittle is on the slate. Laporta. I want to ask you about Dalton Schultz to get it started. He was kind of the odd man out last week for Houston. He only had 2 targets. He had been running really good. He was getting a lot of work. He was catching some touchdowns. He had 5 touchdowns in 7 games. You mentioned you want to pick on Denver's defense. Could that be a way to do it? Because I kind of like him this week.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I definitely, would favor Tank and Nico, whose price tags are fairly reasonable compared to their peers, whereas Dalton Schultz, in a slate where you're not going to have Hawkinson, not going to have Andrews, not going to have Kelsey, like Schultz is priced up a little bit here, but the matchup should be pretty good. 0.5 EPA allowed on targets to tight ends by Denver. And really overall, Denver, 400 yard per game allowed team, at least heading into this past weekend. I would say that you could play any Texan and I wouldn't feel that bad about it. Obviously, we have the ones we prefer. But I think that Dalton Schultz would be in the mix. And I think QBs +3 are in the mix as well, where you could go Tank, Nico, and Schultz. You're paying a good amount there, but still not that much. I would also be able to chase Freiermuth. I think that Freiermuth, big game last week. He was my Goblin just because I didn't play him. But I do think that kind of workload that he had would put him in the elite tier right away. So those are the 2 that stand out. But I feel like this week, just because there aren't any stars, I feel like it's really wherever you get a tight end, whatever, and just hope it works out.
Correct. I do want to ask you just gut feel. Do you think QB +3 is in play for Pittsburgh as well?
Oh God. In play, it feels like a very narrow outcome. Just because Kenny Pickett, the ceiling hasn't been there. But if the running backs don't get there, maybe a QB +3 can hit. I think it'll come up in the Sims because of the price tag. So I'm willing to get there. And if that allows you to afford Tyreek and afford, maybe Tyreek and McCaffrey or something like that, that can win, I would say, if those guys have outlier days. So I think you can get there, but it's not gonna feel fun.
No, it's definitely not gonna feel fun. We'll see. I will say, right in that same price range is Njoku, 9 targets again. He's got 24 targets in 2 games. He's got 33 targets in 3 games. He's getting the work. Now it's the Browns. It's Browns passing attack. It's not the best thing we've ever seen, but he's 4,100 again. I think that's a pretty playable tag. You mentioned tight end. As long as I don't hate the play, I'm more content to say, okay, this guy lands in the price range I need. I'm going to play him. And for me, Njoku fits that mold.
Yeah, I played Njoku this week a little bit. I actually had a few DTR stacks, which was a bummer when he went out because he's finally starting to look like a QB that actually could play at the level that he played in college. But either way, Njoku's been heavily involved, whether it be Walker or DTR in there. So I think Njoku makes sense. And besides that, I guess Laporte is the only tight end I actually like on the slate as a player. But he's also priced up a little bit, 5,600 for him. So yeah, I feel like tight end is going to be one of those weeks where whoever projects the best, great. If it's McBride again, whatever. I just couldn't care less.
Yeah, I'll give one more. Again, these are it's pretty thin down here. You've got we've seen Otten and Everett, and certainly Logan Thomas might be attachment to Sam Howell. I keep trying to make Chigokonkwo happen. I'll honor Lofty for this show. He's a big fan of him. It hasn't really happened this year. The guy's got a whopping 0 touchdowns. He is 3,100 though. I'm not sure if you're going to be that starved for value that you want to do that, but I will give him a quick shout out as maybe a basement price tag of a guy that I do think has some TD equity week in and week out. He's just run pretty poor.
Indianapolis has been bottom of the barrel in terms of explosive plays given up in the past games. So you can make the case, I think, to get there. I haven't been the biggest Chig guy this year just because I felt like last year the offense, it was like if Burks was out, Chig could get there. But now we have Hopkins who just kind of is always there taking enough away. But at 3,100, I guess for sure, like he's a guy that you'll get some of. But yeah, I just don't have strong feelings for Chig.
Yeah, last guy, Chad, appreciate this. This is true. Another domino. If Olave and Shaheed happen to miss, Juwan Johnson, definitely someone who could factor in. I see that. I really think that he's going to be possibly playable no matter what in some regards. We've done it, my friend. We're not done yet because we're not going to let you out of here without giving a defense on the way out. We do less than 3,000, a $3,000 or less defense. You've got 8 of them to choose from.
I don't even have the defense. I don't even have the defenses on my sheet. That's how little I care about defenses. So let's see who's cheaper. Do you want to start it? Because I have
sure. I always look for like kind of a shady one. I'm gonna go, and this again, I'm gonna go with New England. They're $2,400. They're at home. I hope it's nasty against the Chargers. Give me a couple Herbert interceptions for me. Bottom of the barrel punt defense. Like you, I could care less about defense. You've got 8 to choose from the Cardinals, Eagles, Titans, Saints, Broncos, Panthers, Patriots, and Commanders. The Commanders, I know anything can happen. That just seems like a really tough ask against Miami.
Yeah, I guess maybe with how Jared Goff's been running lately, and it does feel like, like Saints maybe in play. I think Goff will turn it around a little bit, but maybe getting figured out a little bit, maybe just running bad. I don't know, but he's been sloppy now for a few weeks in a row, and the Saints are an opportunistic defense enough, and it's a home game for the Saints as well. So maybe the Lions do fall off a tier, and then that's how the Saints D gets there. So I guess I would go with them.
Yeah, I get that. Again, we've seen Goff against the Bears, he was just serving them up. And maybe that does continue. We're a couple minutes over, but we did it again. Follow this man at Chris Spags. He's doing all sorts. You got content coming up right now, apparently. Do you not?
Yeah, I'm going to go head over to the Splash Play channel at Splash Play Pod on YouTube, and I'll be doing my best ball review show. But I do shows usually 11 a.m. Every day, Monday to Friday here. So trying to build up a channel, trying to get to 3K subs on there. So all you fine stochastic people, come spend some time with me over there. And if nothing else, just subscribe. I mean, I prefer you watch the videos, but just subscribe so we get to 3K and I could feel like a human.
Got it. I'm at JazzRaz DFS. And of course, we appreciate everyone here. If you want to hit the like button on your way out, make sure to check those description links. We got money for you in there, deals to be had. Jordan Klein powering the show as always. Appreciate you. Behind the glass, friends. First Tuesday look in the books. Coffee will be back soon enough. You're going to see me and Spags on Sunday reviewing these takes and seeing where this slate leads us. But for me, for Spags, and for Jordan behind the glass, good luck. Enjoy your day. Talk to you guys soon.